The night before the dinner, I ironed my mother's blouse for her. She'd brought it all the way from Sudbury in a plastic dry cleaning bag, the kind she saves and reuses, and she held it up in my spare room like she was presenting something fragile. "Is this okay?" she asked. "For their house?" And something about the way she said it. The smallness of her voice, my mother who raised 3 kids on a teacher's salary and never once asked anyone's permission for anything. Something about that made my chest go tight in a way I couldn't name yet. "It's beautiful, Mom," I said, and I meant it. I should have paid more attention to that tightness. "My name is Lena. I'm 31 years old. I'm a registered nurse at St. Mike's in Toronto. And for 2 years, I was engaged to a man I'll call my fiancé. Because that's what he was to me. The whole shape of my future. The person I called when anything happened, good or bad. His name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what happened on a Saturday evening in October at his parents' house in Forest Hill. Over a dinner I had spent 3 weeks trying to make perfect. We'd been together 4 years before he proposed. 4 years of me driving up to his parents' place for holidays, learning how his mother liked her coffee, remembering that his father's knee bothered him in cold weather, bringing the right wine, wearing the right things, laughing at the right moments. I was fluent in them. I thought they were fluent in me. His mother, I'll call her what she was to me then, my future mother-in-law, is the kind of woman who makes you feel watched. Not in a hostile way. Not at first. More like you're always being quietly assessed, filed somewhere, and you don't know yet whether the verdict is good or bad. She wore silk blouses to casual lunches. She'd grown up in Rosedale and had opinions about everything from butter tarts to Bay Street that she delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never once been wrong about anything. My fiancé had grown up in the house. He'd absorbed her certainty the way you absorb an accent, without noticing, until someone points it out. I hadn't noticed. Or maybe I had, and I decided it didn't matter. Because I loved him. And love makes you generous in ways that can look, in retrospect, a lot like blindness. The dinner was supposed to be the official introduction. Both families, together. His parents and his aunt, his mother's younger sister who'd flown in from Vancouver, and my parents, who drove down from Sudbury on the Friday night and slept in my second bedroom. My older brother drove in from Mississauga with his wife. 5 people from my side, 4 from his, and a meal that his mother had insisted on hosting because, she said, it only makes sense, we have the space. I had agreed. Of course I had agreed. My mother spent 2 days making her butter tart squares because she brought them to every social occasion for 30 years and she was proud of them. My dad polished his shoes. I am not exaggerating when I say he polished his shoes. My father is a retired high school shop teacher who coached hockey on weekends, and he does not polish his shoes for anyone. But he did for this. We arrived at 6. The house looked like a magazine. The kind of magazine my mother would flip through at the dentist and then set back down carefully, like it had nothing to do with her. High ceilings, original woodwork, a dining table that could seat 12. It smelled like wood smoke and something roasting, and I remember thinking, okay, this is going to be okay. His aunt was warm right away. She shook my mother's hand with both of hers and said she'd heard wonderful things, and my mother visibly softened. My brother cracked a joke about the drive and my future father-in-law laughed, a real laugh, and I let myself exhale. Then I saw the table. I noticed it before anyone else did, I think, because I'd asked about the seating arrangement twice in the weeks leading up to this dinner. Not because I'm controlling. Because I wanted my parents to feel comfortable. I'd specifically, clearly, asked that my parents sit near my fiancé and me, close to the head of the table, so they wouldn't feel stranded on one end while his family dominated the conversation. His mother had said, "Of course, we'll figure it out." What she'd figured out? My parents and my brother and his wife were at one end of the table, the far end, near the kitchen door. His parents, his aunt, and a family friend I'd never met before, who had apparently been added to the guest list without anyone telling me, were clustered at the head. with 2 seats left for my fiancé and me, right in the middle. Not close to my parents, not close to his, in the middle, like a buffer zone between 2 countries that didn't fully trust each other. My mother found her name card. I watched her read it. I watched her read the name card next to hers, my father's, and then look up at the table layout, doing the same quiet math I had just done. She didn't say anything. She pulled out her chair and she sat down and she folded her hands in her lap, and something in the way she did it, the careful, practiced dignity of someone who has been made to feel small before and decided a long time ago not to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing it, broke something open in me. I found my fiancé in the kitchen. "The seating," I said quietly. "My parents are at the end." He glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. "It works out better for the conversation flow," he said. "Mom bought." "I asked her specifically," I said. 2 weeks ago, I asked. "Lena." He said my name the way you say someone's name when you want them to stop. "It's just a seat. Let's not make this a thing. It's just a seat." "I want you to remember he said that." I went back to the dining room. I helped carry bread from the kitchen. I smiled when his aunt told a story about a hiking trip. I poured water. I watched my mother be gracious and warm and funny, despite everything. Watched her make my future father-in-law laugh twice. Watched her try, genuinely try. And I thought, she drove 5 hours for this. She ironed her blouse. She made butter tart squares. Halfway through the main course, his mother said it. She wasn't talking to me. She was talking to the family friend at the other end of the table, across my fiancé, and she wasn't even being particularly quiet. She said it the way you say something you consider to be simply a fact. "Well, we did what we could with the arrangement. You can't mix everyone together and expect it to flow." The family friend murmured something I couldn't hear. His mother said, "It's fine. They seem very..." She paused. "Just long enough. Comfortable." Comfortable? In her mouth, it sounded like the opposite of something. Like the careful word you use when the real word is not polite. My father was in the middle of telling my brother something about the hockey season, and he didn't hear it. My mother was looking down at her plate, and I couldn't tell if she had or hadn't. My fiancé was pouring more wine for his aunt, and his jaw was set in a way I recognized. The way that meant he had heard and was choosing not to acknowledge it. I put my fork down. I didn't make a scene. I didn't stand up, not yet. I sat there for the rest of the dinner, and I was pleasant, and I helped clear the plates, and I put my mother's butter tart squares on the fancy serving platter his mother had set out, because, to her credit, she had set one out, and I watched his mother eat one and say, "These are sweet," in a tone that was not quite a compliment. My mother said, "My grandmother's recipe." His mother said, "How lovely," and turned to talk to the family friend. My brother drove our parents back to my place after dinner. My fiancé and I stayed to help clean up, which was what we always did, which was part of the performance I had been trained into without realizing there was a stage. When his parents went upstairs, I stood in their kitchen and I looked at my fiancé, and I said, "Your mother made my parents feel like guests at someone else's event." He sighed. He actually sighed like I was the exhausting part of this evening. She hosted a dinner for 12 people on 2 weeks' notice. "Can you give her some credit?" She said they were comfortable like it was an insult. "You're reading into it." "Your mother seated my parents by the kitchen door." Lena. There it was again, my name used as punctuation, as a full stop. My mother made an enormous effort tonight. Not everyone does things the way your family does. That doesn't mean she's being cruel. I looked at him for a moment, really looked at him. "You heard her say it," I said, "and you didn't say anything." He looked away first. I drove home. I sat in my car outside my building for 15 minutes before I went up, because my parents were there and I didn't want my face to tell them anything before I knew what I was going to do about it. My mother was in the kitchen making tea. She looked up when I came in and she said, "It was a beautiful house." And I could hear, under all the warmth she was working to project, the specific quiet of someone who has decided to be kind about something that wasn't kind to them. "Mom," I said. The food was lovely, she said, not looking at me. Mom, I'm sorry. She turned around then. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, You don't have to be sorry. It's not yours to be sorry for. And that was somehow the worst and the best thing she could have said. I didn't sleep much. I lay in my bed in my apartment and I thought about the dinner, and I thought about the past 4 years, and I started doing the thing you do when something cracks. You start looking at all the other cracks you've been calling character, calling quirks, calling family dynamics, and you see them for what they are. The Christmas where his mother rearranged the gift table so my presents to his family were at the back. The summer barbecue where she introduced my mother to her friends as Lena's mom, without ever using her name, because she hadn't retained it. The time she told me my condo was a good starter place. The time she asked whether my parents had ever thought about moving somewhere more central. The way she talked about Sudbury. Not badly, never badly. Just with this faint befuddlement, like it was a charming but impractical choice. I had explained each one away. The next morning, I called my fiancé. He picked up on the second ring, which told me he was also awake early, also thinking about it. I need you to tell me something honestly, I said. Do you think my family is less than yours? Silence? I don't think less than is. Do you think my family is less than yours? I said again. Not a question this time. More silence. They're different, he said finally. We grew up differently. That's not a judgment. Your mother seated my parents by the kitchen door and called them comfortable, and you said nothing, and then told me I was reading into it. I need to know if that's something you see as a problem. Another long pause. I think, he said carefully, that you have very high expectations for how things should go, and sometimes that makes it hard for other people to feel like they can do anything right. I listened to him say that. I let it sit in the air between us. Okay, I said. Thank you for being honest. I hung up. I sat at my kitchen table, and I thought about 4 years. I thought about the ring on my finger, which had been his grandmother's, which his mother had presented to him in front of me at Christmas dinner, like a ceremony I wasn't quite part of. I thought about the venue deposit we put down in August, the $22,000, half from my savings, half from his, and the guest list spreadsheet on my laptop that I'd spent 6 weeks building. I thought about my mother ironing her blouse. I texted my best friend, who lives in Hamilton, and I said, I think I'm done. And she called me in 45 seconds flat. It took me 3 weeks to end the engagement. Not because I wasn't sure, I was sure, with the cold clarity you get when you finally stopped explaining something away, but because I needed to do it right. I saw my own lawyer. I documented the deposit situation. I made a list of shared items and how to divide them fairly. I am a planner by nature, and even in the dissolution of the most significant relationship of my adult life, I could not stop planning. The conversation with my fiancé was long and painful, and I won't give you all of it, but I'll give you this part. When I told him why, when I laid out the dinner and the 4 years of small erasures, he said, I never thought you'd walk away over a seating chart. And I said, I'm not walking away over a seating chart. I'm walking away because when I told you it hurt me, you told me I was wrong to be hurt. And you've been telling me that for 4 years, and I've been believing you. He didn't have an answer for that. His mother called me 2 days later. I almost didn't pick up. But I did, because I'm someone who picks up. She said she was sorry I felt that the dinner hadn't gone well. She said she'd worked hard to make everyone comfortable. She said she hoped I understood how much effort she'd put in. I let her finish. Then I said, I know you worked hard on the dinner, and I'm sure from where you were sitting, everything looked fine. But my mother drove 5 hours to meet your family, and she sat by the kitchen door, and she was called comfortable in a tone that meant something other than a compliment, and your son told me I was reading into it. What I needed, over 4 years, was for your son to be someone who would notice that. He isn't. That's not your fault. But it's still true. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I hope you know this isn't what I wanted. I believe you, I said. I also think what you wanted was a version of me that would have never said any of this. I don't know if that was kind, but it was honest. I gave the ring to my fiancé in person, at a coffee shop on Bloor, on a Thursday afternoon. I'd put it in a small velvet box that I'd ordered online, specifically because I didn't want to just hand it to him loose. Didn't want the moment to be any more undignified than it had to be. He didn't say much. He looked at the box for a moment, then picked it up and put it in his coat pocket. I really did think we were going to make it, he said. Me too, I said, and that was true. I walked home. It was October still. Cold enough that my breath showed, and the leaves were doing what they do in Toronto in fall. That brief, violent beauty before everything goes bare. I walked the long way, through the park, because I wasn't ready to be inside yet. My mother called that evening. She didn't know. I hadn't told my parents the full story yet, just that things had changed. But she called anyway, the way she sometimes does, the way that feels less like coincidence than like some old antenna she has that's tuned to my frequency. Just checking in, she said. How are you doing? I thought about what to say. I thought about butter tart squares on a fancy platter and a blouse ironed in my spare room. And the phrase they seem very comfortable and 4 years of explaining things away. I'm okay, I said. I think I'm actually okay. She didn't push. She just said, good. That's enough for today. It was enough. It was, in fact, exactly enough. 6 months later, I am sitting in my apartment on a Sunday morning, and it is quiet in a way I have slowly, over these months, come to understand is not the same as lonely. My parents came to visit last month, and we went to the St. Thada, Lawrence Market, and my mother bought a jar of local honey, and my father argued cheerfully with a vendor about the merits of lake trout, and it was so ordinary and so easy and so unmarked by the need to perform or minimize or shrink. And I stood there in that loud, bright market, and I felt, all at once, like I could breathe at full capacity. I think about the dinner sometimes, not with bitterness. Mostly not, anyway. More with a kind of precision. The clarity that comes after. There's a thing I've learned about love that I wish someone had told me earlier. Love is not enough if it doesn't include respect. And respect is not a grand gesture. It is not a speech or a declaration. It is paying attention. It is noticing when someone you love is being diminished and choosing to say something. It's so small. It takes seconds. And it makes all the difference in the world. My mother never made a fuss about that dinner. She's not the kind of woman who does. But once, about a month after everything was over, she called me on a Sunday, and somewhere in the conversation she said quietly, I'm proud of you, you know, for knowing what you were worth. I didn't cry until after I hung up. But I did cry, and it felt honestly like relief. I think about my mother ironing that blouse a lot, more than I probably should, or maybe exactly as much as I need to. She stood in my spare room and held it up under the light like she was making sure it was good enough, and I didn't understand then what I understand now, that she wasn't asking about the blouse. She was asking whether she was going to be okay in that house, with those people, and she just didn't have the words for it, or didn't want to put that weight on me, before a night that was supposed to be a happy one. There's something that happens when you spend long enough explaining away the small things. You stop seeing them as a pattern and start seeing them as personality, as difference, as just the way some families are. And maybe that's true. Maybe some of it was just difference. But difference doesn't explain choosing silence when the person you love is being made to feel like a guest at her own future family's table. Difference doesn't explain the sigh, or the it's just a seat, or the you have very high expectations. Those weren't cultural gaps. Those were choices, and choices, eventually, accumulate into a verdict. What I had to reckon with, and it took me months to actually reckon with it honestly, is that I had not been foolish for loving him. I'd been unwise about what I was willing to overlook in the name of that love. There's a difference, and knowing the difference matters. Wisdom isn't about being clever or suspicious or keeping score. It's about paying attention. It's about trusting what you see, not just what you're told to see. I had seen so many things clearly and then talked myself out of the clarity. And that cost me 4 years I can't get back. I'm not bitter about the time. but I'm honest about what happened to it. The other thing I had to learn, and this is the harder one, is that standing up for yourself is not the same as being difficult. I spent so long afraid of being labeled dramatic, oversensitive, someone who makes everything a thing. That fear kept me quiet in kitchens and at dinner tables and in conversations where I should have said something. What I know now is that the people who genuinely love you do not need you to stay quiet to keep the peace. They make peace with you in it. My fiancé needed me smaller to keep his world comfortable. That's not love. That's maintenance. And then there's the part I'm most proud of, which is that I didn't fall apart. I cried. Yes. I grieved properly. The way you have to grieve when something you really wanted turns out to be something you can't keep. But I also made a plan, found a lawyer, returned the ring with a velvet box, because I still believed the moment deserved some dignity. And I walked home through the October leaves and kept going. That kind of steadiness, the ability to stay upright through something that would be easier to survive lying down, that isn't something you're born with. It's built. Every time you choose the harder, honest thing over the easier, quiet thing, you build a little more of it. My mother said she was proud of me for knowing what I was worth. I think what she meant is that she raised me to know it, and she was relieved to see it finally hold. That's enough. That has always been enough.